Shalom, my friends. Welcome to Weekly Parsha with Yehuda. Parsha Toldot. So yeah, here we have some interesting narrative with starting. This is really where we have the core of Jacob and Esau being born and the eternal struggle between them. So we have Rebecca being barren, not being able to have children, typical motif in many of the patriarchs. This is a theme that happens over and over again in the Tanakh. Righteous couple together, and the woman is unable to give birth. So that was the situation with Rebecca and Isaac, and it talks about two children who are struggling within her, the twins, right? It says, the Lord said to her, two nations are in your womb, and two kingdoms will separate from your innards, and one kingdom will be mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. Uses the word yavod. This was an instance of the word yavod being used in a sense of not referring to divine worship, unless you want to say that Esau worships Jacob as a god. I mean, I know he's an idol worshiper, but I don't think that's the context of what that is referring to there, right? So just to give some context there. And then here, of course, we have the appearance of Esau. Now, this has been a point of contention. Notice here, nothing in these verses say that the birth of Jacob or Esau, it doesn't describe their skin color or anything like that. It just describes one emerge, and it translates it as ruddy or admoni. It's the same word that's used to describe King David when the prophet Samuel was going to anoint him as king. It says admoni to describe him. So it's typically understood that it's the way like a hairy red like not skin complexion, but more in like a hairy sense. And in a dome means red in Hebrew, so that's where you get this reddish color from. But a lot of people don't understand what that means. They try to argue that they know Esau's skin color somehow. There's nothing here that indicates that we know that definitively one twin was one particular skin color, that Jacob was one color and Esau was a completely different contrasting color. That is completely unfounded in the biblical narrative, in the Hebrew and the English. So then we have them growing up, and of course we have Jacob. Oh, here we have the famous selling of the birthright, right? Jacob says, to Esau that he's going to have Esau sell him his birthright because Esau is hungry and he just went out hunting. And Jacob says, all right, sell me your birthright in exchange for red stuff, right? It says, pour me that red stuff, for I am faint. So Esau sold his firstborn birthright he sold his lentils and gave his birthright to Jacob. There it is. So you have the lentils being sold and the exchange. Then we have more. Here's something interesting, right? As far as Abraham, right? We talk about Abraham's faith, right? That made him righteous. That's something that we discussed in Parshat Lech Lecha. But here, it talks about the same context. It says, I will multiply your seed like the stars in the heavens, and I will give you in your seed all of these lands, and the nations of the earth will bless themselves by your seed, because Abraham hearkened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, and my statutes. Right? So Christians like to often say that it was only because of Abraham's faith that this promise was given to him. Obviously, it's not through faith in Jesus. Abraham didn't believe in Jesus. There is no evidence that Abraham believed in Jesus in any context whatsoever, according to the Tanakh. But in addition to Abraham's faith, God, that same promise that God gave to Abraham in Parsha Lech Lecha concerning his seed inheriting the land, very similar promise. It's not just because of his faith, it's also because of his actions in keeping his commandments, God's commandments. So then we have Isaac and the story with Abimelech, very similar to the story that happened with Abraham when Sarah, where she is my sister. It's a very similar narrative. And then you have the man became great and constantly grew greater until he had grown very great. Right? Isaac is, gains a lot of riches, and he digs some wells. So the digging of the wells have significance in the fact that they're spots in the future that have very big significance. Let's see what the commentary says. I'm curious what it says about the well here, because usually the wells are connected with some future landmark. They dug the wells in the day of his father Abraham, and the Philistines had stopped up before Isaac traveled to Gerar, and he went back and dug them. Well, it's not giving us much, but usually these wells have some future. Well, I guess it says here, it says they called it Rehovot. Yeah. So I guess that it says, he said, for now the Lord has made room for us and we'll be fruitful in the land. So I guess that's the context of why it was named that. Genesis 26, Beersheba. The Lord appeared to him on that night. I am the God of Abraham, your father. So he's appearing to Isaac. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your seed for the sake of Abraham, my servant. Right? So the promise is given to Isaac as well. They built an old... Oh, maybe here we're going to get some information about these wells. Maybe not. Either way, you can do your own research on that. So, Abimelech, and there's a pact that there won't be harm between the two. Now we have... There's a feast being made. Isaac escorted them. Okay, fine. So now we have... Okay, so let's get to the Esau part, right? You have Esau, he marries Judith. This is interesting. I always found it interesting that his wife's name was Judith, Yehudit. Right? That's I think that's the first instance, I guess Yehudit predated Yehuda. Right? Interesting, right? And, Judah, right? So I guess the name had origins before that. Interesting side point. And it came to pass when Isaac was old, his eyes were too dim to see, and he called Esau his elder son and said to him, my son, here I am, right? Behold, I have grown old, and I do not know the day of my death. So sharpen your implements and bow and go forth to the field and hunt game for me. Tasty food, right? So we know the story. Rebekah heard what was happening because he knew that the blessing was going to be passed down to Esau if she didn't do anything about it. Now remember that blessing that Abraham received from Melchizedek, Shem, right? Shem, actually, if we go back to the first Aliyah, I think the commentary tells us that Shem, let me see, it talks about how Rebekah was asking about whether or not these nations were going to be in her womb, that she actually went to inquire to Shem, who was the priest of God Most High, right? So it says, when she passed by the entrances of the Torah academies of Shem and Ever, Jacob would struggle to come out. When she passed by the temple of idolatry, Esau would struggle to come out. It's an interesting midrash. You can take it or leave it. But I always found that to be an interesting idea. It says the Lord said to her through a messenger. Shem was told through divine inspiration. That's who we understand to be Melchizedek, right? So I guess in that sense, she received the revelation that her children were going to be fighting, and throughout the generations through Shem. So Shem, who is Melchizedek. Fun fact, right? So then you have, go make a flow. Okay, fine. So Esau is a hairy man. This is where Esau is tricked by Jacob through Rebekah and Jacob's schemes to, I mean, this was for the greater good, obviously, because that blessing that Abraham received from Melchizedek was passed down to Isaac. And Isaac, of course, was very successful, as we see. And now the blessing is being passed down from from Isaac to Jacob. And Rebekah knew the importance of that, especially since she was in contact with Melchizedek, who was Shem, right? As we discussed. Shem actually outlived Abraham, which is fascinating, right? Because he was 10 generations removed, but we know that people who were born before the flood had extremely long lifespans. So Shem actually lived during the same time that Jacob did. So Jacob said to Rebekah, behold, my brother is hairy and I'm smooth. So they put on some disguise with some to make him hairy because his father was blind. And the blessing is given to Jacob instead of to Esau. And obviously Esau is very, very frustrated about this and very angry. And it's interesting, the blessing that's given, right? So here he says, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field which the Lord has blessed. So what ended up happening was, the blessing was, and may the Lord give you the dew of the heavens and the fatness of the earth and the abundance of grain and wine. Nations will serve you and kingdoms shall bow down to you, and you will be a master of your brothers, and your mother's sons shall bow down to you. Those who curse you shall be cursed, and those who bless you shall be blessed. Right? So that was given to Jacob, although he was intending it for Esau. And it came to pass when Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and it came to pass that Jacob had left his father's presence, that his brother Esau came from his hunt. And he made many tasty foods, brought him to his father, and he said, let my father arise and eat of the game of his son, so that my soul will bless you, so that your soul will bless me. So Esau is completely clueless. He thinks he's getting the blessing. He says, who are you? Isaac says, who are you? And then Esau says, well, I'm your firstborn, Esau. And Isaac shuddered a great shudder and said, who is this one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate of everything while you had not come, and I blessed him. He too shall be blessed, right? So then Esau realized what happened, and then he cried a bitter cry and says, bless me too. Give me a blessing. And Isaac says, your brother came with cunning and took your blessing. And then Esau says, is this for a reason that he was named Jacob? For he deceived me twice. He took my birthright. Behold, and now he's taken my blessing. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? And Isaac answered to Esau, behold, I made him a master over you, and I gave him to him all his brother's servants, and I sustained him with corn and wine. So then what shall I do, my son? So Esau begs for a blessing, even though he realizes that he was outsmarted. And his father Isaac answered him and said, behold, your dwelling place shall be fat places of the earth, and the dew of the heaven from above. Similar to the first blessing at the beginning, but then it says, you shall live by the sword. This is the different part. And you shall serve your brother, and it will be when you grieve that you will break his yoke off your neck. And then Esau hated Jacob for this blessing because it was inferior to the blessing that was given to Jacob. And he threatens to kill him. Right? It was interesting because I think Isaac's initial plan was to have Isaac and Jacob have different roles That's the way he saw it. But Rebecca saw that Esau was going to be, I guess, greedy with the role. He wasn't going to, hold his weight brother to brother. So they took matters into their own hands, and Jacob received the most of the bracha, most of the blessing. So yeah, then we have some interesting narratives about what it talks about Laban, right? Jacob is supposed to go and take a wife from the daughters of Laban, but not the Canaanites. Esau married Canaanites, but not Jacob. And then we have the final part. It's interesting because, okay, so Esau married more Canaanite wives, and he didn't care. He married them anyway, even though his father didn't like it. And so Esau went to Ishmael, and he took the daughter of Ishmael, so the son of Abraham, the sister of Nebaioth, in addition to his other wives as a wife. So we have a union of Edom and Ishmael. Interesting. There's a lot in this Parsha, a lot to say. I encourage you all to study it with the commentaries. Tell me if you find any interesting insights. It's epic. Hope this video has been a bracha to you. Shalom Aleichem.